Hello and welcome to Move or Improve with Debbie. I'm Debbie Miller, your host. And I talk a lot about construction and whether you should move or whether you should age in place and stay put where you are. And today I want to talk about credit scores because credit scores are important if you want to get a loan. And you may want to stay put and need a construction loan or a 203K to make improvements, or you may want to move and you need to take out a mortgage to get your new place. And I'm really lucky today to have Paul Denmon with First Heritage Mortgage with me. Paul is an expert. He's got like 30 years of experience. He's not just any old guy, but he's got the lowdown on construction loans, 203K, but you can't get a loan unless you know what your credit score is. So let's back up, start at the beginning, and talk to Paul today about credit scores, how to understand, and maybe if you have to improve them, what steps you can take. So welcome to the show, Paul. So glad you could join me.
Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the introduction. And I am an old guy, but I'm happy to talk about credit scores. A lot of times when we talk to consumers, they feel like they have a pretty good handle on it because of all the information out there these days about online that they can get, credit monitoring services. But we find still that some of their information falls a little short. So as a loan officer, when we're talking to consumers about their credit score, we do a little education, usually initially with them.
It's important because everybody has their own opinion and they believe what they see on the ads on the radio or in the mail or whatever. So first of all, though, tell everybody what the loan officer's definition of a credit score is, why it's important, and what's the difference between a credit score and a credit report.
Sure. So a credit score is simply a number derived from the information on your credit report. It's calculated from that very information on your credit report. And what it does for lenders is it helps us predict our risk for that particular loan and what kind of rate you get, what kind of program you should be in, that sort of thing. It helps us determine what it is. Most lenders, in general, not just mortgage lenders, use what's called the FICO score. That's the most common brand name for a FICO score. But the importance of the score is it determines what your rate is. It determines how much down payment you might have to put down. So it's real important to get a good handle on that before you apply for a mortgage or a home equity line of credit. And believe it or not, on the credit scores, there are different scores for different types of loans. So if you go into your auto dealership to buy a car and they pull up your credit report, they're going to use something that's more geared to auto loans. And it's a better predictor, that credit score is a better predictor of auto loans. Where mortgage companies, we pull all three and three bureaus. There's three repositories or bureaus, and we'll get to that. And we take the middle score is the typical methodology for lenders to use.
Interesting. Okay, so the top factors are how fast you pay your bills. Are you regularly on time with them, or what kinds of things make a difference?
Sure. So, the credit score is based on a formula. And the reason you have three different ones is there's three different formulas. And those formulas are from the three major credit bureaus. So one is TransUnion, one is Equifax, and the third one is Experian. Experian being the most popular only because of the use of the FICO score that comes from Experian. And that's calculated by how much money you owe on credit cards, auto loans, and other loans like student loans, or if you already have a mortgage, how you pay on time, how long you've had the credit, and how much new credit you have, and whether you've inquired recently on new credit. So in other words, if you did go out to buy a car, that'll show up as an inquiry if you went to your bank, credit union, or the auto dealership itself, and they pulled your credit report. So all of these things are the major, 5 factors as to how your credit score is calculated. So it's important to know those actions, for instance, having a bunch of creditors pull your credit report in a short period of time, how that might impact your credit score.
How long does that last? Like, let's say, I don't know, you do say, well, I want to get an extra credit card, and they pull. How long does that pull last on in your credit score?
Right. So when you have somebody pull a credit report, generally it's going to be on there for at least 120 days. It can be up to 6 months before it drops off, but it doesn't really impact your score. If you had a credit pull 6 months ago, it's not going to drive your score down. Now, if you had it 2 weeks ago from the time I look at your credit report, then that's going to impact your score.
Interesting. Is it impacted a lot or just a little, or this is
right?
Okay.
Right. Yeah. No. Good question, Debbie. The credit inquiry, actually, that's the one question we get the most from consumers because we're about to pull their credit often on that first conversation. But that doesn't really impact your score all that much. And one of the features of getting a mortgage is if you have mortgage lenders pull your credit in a 2-week period, generally it's not going to impact your score at all, just the one pull. So if you have 3 different lenders. Mm-hmm.
I've had several buyers say, well, I don't want to have my credit score. I don't want you to pull my credit yet because I'm not quite ready to make a commitment. And I'm saying, well, how are you going to know what your score is if you don't pull it? And then they get all nervous about it because they think automatically it's going to be a blip on their credit score. So that's good to know.
Correct. Yeah. But the bigger impact really that we find with consumers on credit reports is the amount of debt they have on a credit card relative to how much they could have. So in other words, if you have a credit card and the top limit is $10,000, and you owe $9,000 to the credit card company on any given month, that actually impacts your score a heck of a lot more in a negative way than having a couple inquiries.
Interesting. So what's a good ratio? I've heard don't have any more than 25 or 30%. Like if you have 10,000 maximum, only have about 25% of that as used up. Is that a good guideline? Or because some people say, well, I want to pay it all off.
Yeah, no. And that's a good question. So the answer is it depends. My rule of thumb, I typically tell consumers is 40% or less. So 25 to 30 is perfect to tell customers. And one of the nice things mortgage lenders have in the current environment is we can do an analysis of any consumer's credit reports and tell them what they need to do to drive their score to a certain level.
Big help.
Big help. Yeah. So. So this is why it's important to engage with a lender early, no matter what type of mortgage you're planning to get, exactly what to do. Because sometimes people are like, hey, I don't want my credit report pulled now because I'm not going to buy until April of the following year. And it's December, so let's wait. And my answer to that is let's get a baseline right now. Let's look at your credit report. There might be something on there. You had a magazine subscription that went bad, or something silly like a utility bill from college, and it showed up on your credit report and you didn't know about it. It's better to find out that months ahead of before you actually decide to get a loan, so we can address those issues, get a baseline, see where your score is, see what you need to do in the preceding months to drive your score up.
And you see, Paul, this is why we pay you the big bucks. You know all this stuff. And so if you have what is a low score and what is a high score? What's a medium score? What are we talking about?
Sure. So the credit scores go up to 850, but nobody reaches that. People try, but nobody reaches it. So a low score is below 500. That's a super low score. You really can't, as a mortgage lender, do much with that score. A kind of a medium score is about 680. And then once you get into 700 and above, there are different tiers above that, even depending on what you're doing. For instance, like jumbo financing, big loans, that really impact what kind of rate the lender can give you. So a lot of consumers think, hey, as long as I get to 700, I'm fine. That's a good milestone, but it actually doesn't get you the best rates. 760 tends to get you the best rates and above. So if you maintain that level, you're fine. So oftentimes when I talk to a consumer and they've done a great job maintaining their credit, they might be at right around 800 or right slightly below that. And they're like, well, what if you pull my credit and it goes down a few points? Okay, if it goes down a few points, it will impact nothing. So it's a difference between an A++ and an A+++. Really, there's no, beyond the scale you're at, there's nothing that's going to help your down payment or the rate you get once you get about above a 760. And then keep in mind that also varies between lenders. So some lenders have a threshold of 720. Another lender might have a threshold to get a better rate at 730. So it just depends on the lender also. So that's something to know.
So should that be a question a potential buyer, a prospective buyer should ask when they're talking to different lenders? What is your threshold? Is that an important question for them to know before they make their decision on who they want to go with?
Yes, especially if you're talking about credit repair. Mm-hmm. And you're bringing, you have you need to know what your target is, what you need to do to get to that target as far as paying down debt, paying off something, or even opening up a new credit card. Sometimes that helps on your credit score. So it's real important to know where the lender's coming from that you're going to work with, because you wouldn't want to say, hey, I'm just getting up to a 700, so I'm going to be fine. And then you come to find out the lender's at a 720 to get that rate you really wanted.
Yeah, so that makes sense. Yeah, that's a good thing to know. So if you have a derogatory ding on your credit report, like, a judgment or a late payment or bankruptcy, or you closed an account, that's a big no-no. How long does that stay on your report in your file?
So good question, Debbie. And again, I'm going to say it depends. But this is the information I give the consumers when they call me and borrowers want to get something cleaned up. And a lot of times we can help direct them on how to get things cleaned up. And typically when we mean cleanup, let's say it's a judgment or a late payment that went into collection, we get a letter from that creditor saying XYZ creditor has been paid in full on this account. It's a very specific letter the consumer gets. Usually it's only sent by mail. And once they get that letter, we can take that to the credit bureau and clear it up. That should be good for 7 to 10 years. But back to, I've been doing this a long time. I actually had a consumer that I've done a lot of loans with over the years. We cleaned up their credit early on, years and years ago, got it all straightened out. And then literally when they were buying another house 15 years later, that same credit item popped back up on the credit report.
Oh, gosh.
So well beyond the 7 to 10 years. However, so this is why I use that example anytime I talk to a borrower in that situation. I'd say, hey, you spent a lot of time getting this letter, getting this cleared up. Hold on to it. It's one of those very important papers, VIPs, that you want to keep on file.
Absolutely.
Maybe even scan a copy in on a thumb drive or hard drive so you have duplicates, and hold on to it, because these credit items get bought and sold by different companies and they could appear again. Now, I would say after, 15, 20 years, you're probably okay, but it depends on how severe it is and how hard it was to get it cleared up. But you don't want it showing back up all of a sudden for some odd reason. And once you have that letter that proves you paid it, hold on to it.
And then you can just submit it if you ever have to apply again for a mortgage of any kind then. Okay. So
correct.